been asked many times a few times, not too many, maybe 4 or 5, to write a book, and people keep asking me on Facebook, should write a book, a history. But I've tried about 3 or 4 times. I think I'm better at talking than writing, but just remembering little vignettes. I mean, I've been in the business now, I'm retired, but I did 62 years. I'm not the only one that's done that. I've got quite a few friends. It's an amazing business. I've got quite a few friends that are around the same age. I'm 77. I've got friends that are in their 80s, and they've been friends all my life since I was a kid. But so many different aspects of a career that it's not like you see someone who's in the movies or someone's a big star. You kind of think you know your life, but so many of us are just journeymen, and we work hard, and we've done lots of things in the music business, and they're pretty interesting. When I think back at my own life, I started work when I was just turning 14. I was actually 13. I started work at Myer, and that had a big impact on my music career, because at Myer in those days they had a big advertising department, and most of the people who worked in the advertising department were either actors or musicians or whatever, and a lot of them quite famous in their time working in that advertising department just between shows. One of them in particular was John Newman. People may remember Tiki and John's Playhouse or restaurant, the theatre restaurant that was in the city. But John Newman was the head of advertising. And 1961, when I started there, was Myer's 50th anniversary. Now that's hard to imagine, because you 50 years then seemed like a long time, which it is. But not now, not so now. And the pictures of Myer's that I saw when they opened up, there were women in long dresses, big hats, horses and carts out the front of Myer's. Dirt. Burke Street was all dirt. And anyway, it was their 50th anniversary, and they put on a show at the Russell Street Theatre. I can't remember the name of the show now, but it was put on by the staff, went for 6 nights at the Russell Street Theatre in the city, and I auditioned as a 14-year-old for the show, and they gave me a solo spot amongst all these famous actors. I look back with a bit of embarrassment now in what I did. I can remember coming out between acts, and I sang a song called Exclusively Yours, with 3 chords rather than the 4 chords that I now know are necessary, but nobody seemed to complain. And then when I finished that, I bent down on the stage with my Tedesco guitar that I'd had for not too long, plugged it in with plugged it in and played an instrumental with the band that was in the pit called Johnny Guitar, and that was my first bit. Then I went on to join the hairdressing staff. I became an apprentice hairdresser because I worked in the basement until I turned 15, because you can't start an apprenticeship till you're 15. That was the rules. So I went up to the barbershop probably late in the year and just swept floors, and then when I turned 15 I started my apprenticeship. And they had an apprentices award night at the Melbourne Town Hall with the governor along, Sir Dallas Brooks. A lot of people remember Dallas Brooks. You remember Dallas Brooks Hall, but Dallas Brooks himself was down the front row. And so I had to come out. I think I did the same song. And I auditioned for that show. I remember I auditioned at the Trades Hall because it was a general apprentices night. And so I came out and I sang to Sir Dallas Brooks and a packed Melbourne Town Hall just as an item. So that was my first time playing in front of crowds. The other time was, and it's all around Myers. Myers had a big teenage club, and they had a teenage club dance at the Myer Mural Hall, which is huge, and it was packed. And somehow I got up to sing with the band there, and the drummer, who I've had a long association with since. I remember what I sang. I sang Ricky Nelson's Travelling Man. And he said, well, I work at a dance on Sunday nights out in Collingwood. You're welcome to come along and sing a few songs. Well, that was a revelation. It was the Collingwood Youth Club dance next to the Collingwood Town Hall on a Sunday night, which was pretty rough. And there was a band called Laurie, Holton and the Earthquakes. The unusual part of that was they had a big sign in front of the band that was a volcano. So, with smoke coming out of it. But anyway, I got up there and I sang, and I remember the first song I sang there was Little Sister, Elvis Presley's song. But I made the mistake of singing a couple of Del Shannon songs. Evidently, Laurie Holton was famous for Del Shannon songs. So at the end of my first set, I was surrounded by a bunch of thugs, including Laurie Holton, who warned me never to sing Del Shannon songs again in his presence, because he was the Del Shannon. So that for a 15-year-old was a pretty rude awakening. Then I used to walk from Myer down to the station, and I'd walk through the back of Alan's Music, so in their back door, and I'd usually go in and listen to records and stuff like that, because I got to know the staff, and they would play records for me in these little asbestos booths they had with a single speaker. And I got friendly with the guy that worked in the electrical department, that was just inside the back door, Brian Holden. Brian had a band. We'd catch the train back to Essendon, and I lived in Glenroy at the time. And one night we were stopped for a milkshake at the milk bar opposite the station, and he introduced me to Laurie Arthur. And Laurie was the lead guitarist of the Strangers. And he said, well, why don't you come out and sing the song at our dance in Glenroy? They had a dance at Gordon Grove in Glenroy, which was just sensational. With my girlfriend at the time, we caught the train to Glenroy and walked all the way up to the Gordon Grove dance, which is a fair walk actually. And I'd go up there and sing a couple of songs along with the Strangers, and I also sang with Brian Holden's band, the Mustangs, and we became sort of a sub-band for the Strangers. So in those days, we were their mates, so if they went away, we were allowed to fill in for them. If you're a stranger from another territory, forget it. So we were the sub-band for the Strangers quite a few times, as were a few other people. There was Noel Watson, Ian McCausland used to sing there. Ian McCausland became he did all the Cliff Richard stuff, but Ian became famous as McCosmic. He was a graphic artist. He did all the graphics for the Strangers. They were amazing. At this dance at Glenroy, it was a youth club, and the stage was a boxing ring pressed against the hall, against the back wall, so it was all white, and they had this big sign that Ian McCausland had done, the Strangers, in this crazy sort of writing, and the drummer had the same thing. Ian McCausland went on to do many famous album covers like Skyhooks, the Dingoes. He was known as McCosmic in the graphic arts scene, and he's one of the greatest graphic artists. And he did stuff for the Rolling Stones and also Amco. If you remember the big stepping out Amco things. I think that was Ian McCausland. So he was one of the singers at the dance. Noel Watson was another one who got up. Noel Watson became famous many years later singing Waltzing Matilda at the grand final. He came on like a big bushman beard and sang "Once a Jolly Swagman Came." But he was a great rock and roll singer back in those days. So that was all happening at Gordon Grove. I earned my first money ever at Gordon Grove when Laurie Arthur came and tucked $3, well, 30 bob, £1.10 into my pocket then. This was 1962, 63. And that sort of continued on, and I did a lot of dances with my band, and at the same time I got offered a job at Melbourne Town Hall. I think I went and auditioned one night, and I thought nothing of it. Didn't hear anything, and they rang me up and said, "Where are you?" But I ended up working at Melbourne Town Hall every Saturday night. Edithvale Rock, if you remember these dances. Springvale Town Hall every Thursday night with the Premiers. I had my first duo then with the Premiers, with Stan as a Party was the lead guitarist, and Stan was doing a duo with Lee Conway. All these nights, Lee Conway became a top country singer, but at that stage he was the bass player, or he was playing bass, and he was doing a duo, just doing Everly Brothers songs with Stan as a Party, and Everly Brothers songs and that kind of thing. And Lee left, and Stan said, "What do you want to do?" So we became a duo for a while, singing those songs. And, that was at Springvale and at Melbourne Town Hall, which were huge dances. If there were two sides to Melbourne, there was a Melbourne Town Hall, and there was Preston Town Hall, all divided by the Yarra, and two great artists, two top. Bobby Cookson was the big man on the south of the Yarra, and Johnny Chester was the big man north of the Yarra. And eventually Johnny Chester became the big man all over Melbourne. He was just amazing, a hero. I actually lived near Preston Town Hall. I lived in Thornbury, and I worked in a milk bar when I was 12, 13. And kids used to come in, the teenagers would come in, and they were like really old kids to me because I was just 12. They'd come in on Saturday and they'd talk about going to Chester's. And I didn't know what Chester's was. I found out later. But they referred to Preston Town Hall as Chester's because he was the star there with both these, or no they didn't. Preston Town Hall had two halls. They had two dances going at one time, and I did play at Preston Town Hall with the Earthquakes, the one without Laurie Holton, at Preston Town Hall in the second hall. But all those dances, I mean, you could talk for a few hours about them, but I'll probably leave. I'll move on from there because I'd like to tell you about John Farrar, who went on to become one of our great exports. Wrote one of the biggest hits of the 20th century was "You're the One That I Want" and "Hopelessly Devoted." Another Moonee Ponds boy who was the guitar player in our band, the Mustangs, our sub-band. Brian Holden, who I mentioned earlier, left our band after we'd all been beaten up one night at the end of a dance. I learned a very early lesson, and if you're interested in how to get into this business, I can give you a few tips on how to survive too. One thing is, when the gig is finished at a private function, get out of there. That's it. Don't ever do any favours, don't hang around. 16 years old, at a 21st birthday in Preston, I'd been I'd been to Shepparton with this manager, promoter guy, to go to sing on a TV show in Shepparton. It was a Saturday date or whatever, Saturday afternoon teenage show. So it was one camera, compare, and I actually sang over the top of a record. I think I sang over Stan Getz and Charlie Bird's Desafinado. I sang a lyric to with the saxophone. Anyway, I'd done that day, and we'd come back to Melbourne, and my band, the Mustangs, were playing at a private function in Gower Street, Preston, at a little hall, their 21st birthday. So I said, drop me off with the band and I'll go and do the last set with the band and sing a few songs. So we did. Supposed to finish at midnight, but it was all still going well. And let's play a bit more. We'll hang around, So by about 11:45, we said, let's 1:45. Let's finish up. So, and then it's, where are you going? Where are you going? No, what are you? Because there's, once you get to the end of the night, it's only the drunks left, and we're at the front loading the gear into the back of Brian Holden's dad's FC Holden station wagon, and down the side of the hall there was this very nice chap beating the hell out of his girlfriend, and this is going on, and we're all brave. We just went to the side of the hall, and one of us said the immortal words, "Hey mate, leave the Sheila alone." And at that, like it was a signal, the side doors burst open, and all these drunks that were still in, these guys, came out. It's probably 20 of them, and I think 2 of us ended up in hospital. I ended up with, I've still got scars in my mouth. I ate through a straw for 2 weeks, so that's it. I never play any extra. Don't stay around. Don't do any favours. Get out of there. Do the job and go home. But so Brian Holden decided to leave the band after that. He'd had enough of rock and roll. And we knew of this guy, John Farrar, who had a band with his brother, who lived around the corner. They lived in Niddrie. So we thought, let's give him a try. So we gave him a try, and he was just awesome. Most beautiful player. And we used to play at the Plaza Theatre outside the Essendon Town Hall every Friday night. It was the Strangers and the Mustangs. Strangers were the main band. And first night we took John along there to play. The 3 of the Strangers noticed how good he was. So they fired Laurie Arthur and took our John Farrar. After we only had him for 2 weeks, but the only problem for the Strangers was that Laurie Arthur, who they fired, ran the dance with his father, so they also lost a job. So Laurie needed a band. They took John Farrar, we got Laurie, and that became the Laurie Arthur 4, which eventually went on to be the Mixtures and whatever. But of course John went on to do some wonderful things with the Go Show, and we're still friends. We see each other quite often. He'll come out to Australia. I usually go over to America every now and then and annoy him. John Creech and I had dinner at his house. He's still a boy from Moonee Ponds, but a very well-to-do boy from Moonee Ponds, but still the same good bloke. A wonderful player, and been a good friend all my life. And as most of those are, like the Strangers, Peter Robinson. Peter's probably he's my oldest friend, and in many ways. He was my best man at one of my weddings. But we all go back. There's such a lineage of all these players going back over the years. All come from the Mustangs, the Strangers, the Mixtures. The Mixtures were initially half of Normie Rose Band, half of Laurie Arthur 4, and me playing at 10th Avenue. Someone asked what the name of the band was. We were the Lunchtime Band, and I said, we don't have a name, we're a mixture. And later on, when Laurie and John Creech got together, and Rod de Klerk, who I'd convinced to come over from Tasmania, got together, and they became the original Mixtures. A little sign over the back there, that's from Georgia, which was a dance. I think Georgia was a dance, I'm not sure, in Baldwin or but anyway, it was a big dance. It was, so there's the Moods and Terry Dean and the Mixtures down there. I was never part of the band because I was doing quite well as a solo artist, but I worked with the Mixtures as often as I could because it was fun to do. So that's the story up till now, and I might get back with the rest of it if you're interested.